Well, welcome back to The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. I have to admit, I am a bit intimidated interviewing my guest that's on the line with me right now. It is Dennis Byrne. He is a well-respected Chicago journalist. He has written for a number of publications in the past. I know you've written for the Sun-Times, I believe, Dennis. Is that correct?
Yes. And the Tribune.
And the Tribune.
And if you're old enough to remember, the Daily News.
Yeah, you've had quite the long career here in Chicago. You've had a real good look at the inside of newsrooms, and you've had a real good look at all sorts of issues. And I mean, what I really also respect about you, you were an officer in the U.S. Navy, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, there's fewer and fewer people that you find working that have ever served, and so it's unfortunate that it's been such a rare commodity to have served in the military. You certainly did. My son is a U.S. Navy pilot. He's currently deployed off the coast of Italy, so it's not terrible duty. But there's very few people that do make that decision now. And as you know, I mean, this is a whole other topic that we could talk about at some time is, what's happening with our military. And maybe we can have you back for a second podcast on that because I'd love your perspective. So,
sure.
So you started out as, I think, like most reporters, kind of more of a liberal, and certainly you were a Democrat. And then you've kind of had a change of heart on some things, and nobody's going to say that you're a Republican by any means, and I would never say that. But you did some seminal work, and my first interaction with you on a personal level was in 2018, where you helped write, or you actually did ghostwrite the book "The Governor You Don't Know" about Bruce Rauner and his tenure, and it was my campaign that actually asked you to do that. And then now, fast forward, here it is again, The Governor You Do Not Know, very close to the 2018 title, but different. And this one's about JB Pritzker, and that's why I'm having you on the podcast. It's The Governor You Do Not Know, What Every Illinoisan Should Know. It's a small little booklet that was you wrote and then was sent to a number of voters just so that they had a sense of what was going on and the policy issues that really mattered. And I think at its core, it's a great work to do. It's a good educational tool, one, because it's very readable. You bring in real perspective from somebody who is a Democrat. And that's what we've gotten away from. So could you tell me more about the book, why you felt compelled to write it, what your favorite chapter is? Just let's talk about your book.
His favorite chapter. Well, I'll have to think about that. They're all my favorite, whatever. But how did I get to write this book? I was approached, and somebody said, "Well, we used to know. We knew that you used to be a Democrat, but then you kind of switched over. People who read you at the Tribune and the Sun-Times saw that shift." And we're kind of interested to know what prompted me to do that. Events and the Democratic Party moving so far to the left prompted me to do that. It's not like I left the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And so here I was writing an op-ed column for the Sun-Times. This was back in the 80s and 90s. I was member of the editorial board, and every morning we'd sit down and we'd argue about this issue or that. We'd thrash over what the paper's position should be. And everybody was not like-minded on the board. There were some liberals and others. And as I progressed through that, I started to realize I couldn't defend some of the positions that were being taken by the party. And I found myself agreeing more with the conservatives or Republicans or neocons or whatever name they were given. I considered myself a communitarian, which is a name has disappeared from the lexicon. But as I saw through some of these arguments, my columns kind of shifted. Eric Zorn, I think it was, who said, Dennis Byrne, once he was found and now he's lost. And I got a lot of that kind of, I guess you call it criticism. And some of it was pretty nasty. But it was actually the issues themselves that got me to move. It wasn't so much who the people were, but what they were arguing for. As a Democrat, I voted. My first presidential election, was LBJ, so I go back a little ways. And I didn't even vote for. I voted for every Democrat through Ronald Reagan. I didn't vote for Reagan. I voted for the other guy, whoever it was. And so here I am, suddenly shifting sides. And I think it was. I'm interested in telling people what the issues were that got me to move.
Yeah. So fast forward in the state of Illinois, which used to be very purpley. We've had our share of Republican governors, quite frankly, in our history. We've had, Republican control of the state legislature, albeit the House has been really difficult, but we held the Senate for quite a few years. We used to have policy that sort of made sense. And now we're just as liberal as California. It's just remarkable how quickly the shift has happened in the span of about 20 years. And the radical policies that are now being, presented in Illinois don't make sense anywhere. And the fact that, look, how is it that this great state of Illinois, people want to accuse me of always being like the big social conservative warrior. That honestly, I went to Springfield as a state legislator to defend taxpayers. Really, that's what I did. And I don't think that I even put out one single pro-life mailer, by the way. But I guess when you have 5 children, it kind of speaks for itself. But I went there to defend taxpayers. And then you get there and you're like, what? We have the worst credit rating in the entire nation? And we're not even close. We're an outlier. How did this great state, with the 5th largest economy, get this way? It's because of our policies. It's our policies that have got us this way. And if you don't change out the politicians, you're going to get the same thing again. And I like to say, policy really isn't red or blue. It either leads to more freedom, protects your safety, and protects prosperity for the future, or it doesn't. And we're not there. We're not there anymore. What happened?
Well, it's not just the issues that moved everybody. It's the people who finance the positions on the issue. Yeah. Now we're talking about the government unions, in particular the teachers' unions, as if they don't have enough benefits already in their pension. I know people who taught for a good number of years and then retired, who are making over $100,000 in pensions, making more than they ever made as a teacher. Now, there's something terribly wrong with that. First of all, it's unfair to people who put in a lot of time in their job and work honestly and have a small pension, or like people at the Sun-Times had their pension bankrupted by, let's say some shenanigans. And it is just terrible how the Chicago Teachers Union, has no regard for the students. And I'm talking about the leadership, which has gone entirely woke. They're incredible. They call a strike and say they're doing it for the kids. Come on. And their whole thing, and I trace this back to Pritzker, and his lockdown.
Well, that's chapter
policy.
3. Yeah, that's chapter 3 in your book, Pritzker's COVID-19 war. You use the strong word here, war on your school children and what's coming next. So if people don't read it, what is coming next for the school kids? If Pritzker stays in office. Right. Okay. Who knows? Here's what we know. They're not getting educated, and that's been that way for decades. And it, sure, do the parents have a role in this? 100%. But really the teacher unions are so powerful in this state that they control all the Democrat legislators.
And it's true. Well,
And
you
half of
asked
the
what's
Republicans,
coming-
too, by the way. Half the Republicans are
Sure.
empowered. Yeah.
Well, you ask what's coming next. Amendment 1 is on the ballot. Amend the Illinois Constitution, not just the law, but the Constitution, increasing the areas that unions can negotiate. Usually and traditionally, unions negotiate for wages and vacations and health benefits and that kind. Amendment 1 would open the door to unions actually running the schools, deciding, for example, how long the school year should be. This is crazy. And they'll be actually, unions will be negotiating with themselves, because sitting across the table are school boards or state administration that is indebted to the union.
Well, but your former paper, the Sun-Times, is actually owned by a union. So do we have any fair papers anymore?
Oh, well, I should clarify. It was owned by the unions, but it got sold. And now it's a not-for-profit along with the public radio, WGZ.
Okay.
Yeah. Why? Your question again is, have they changed?
Well, I mean, there's not real fair reporting on Amendment 1. In fact, most people probably don't understand that Amendment 1 is the first question on your ballot in the state of Illinois, and it gives state government unions the strongest powers in the country. No other state has this. It enshrines union contractual rights in our Constitution. If it should pass, it would be the most detrimental bill to the future growth of the state of Illinois, bar none. There's literally no other outside. Like, the biggest threat to your safety is the Safety Act. The biggest threat to your pocketbook is Amendment 1. You might as well just hand them the password to your ATM account.
Yeah. Well, a lot going on. This Safety Act has to be amended to restore cash bail, which is going to be now extended to the whole state, where you can let these people who are charged with serious crimes out on bail, without bail, I should say, and commit the kind of horrendous crimes that we've been seeing reported, not so much in the mainstream media, but certainly on Fox News and New York Post and other places that are at least trying to tell the other side of the story.
Yeah, so it's so as the digital age has come into a forefront, it's really much harder for traditional media to have as much sway as they had before. However, they do have they have powerful names that people look to, and that is quickly, I think, should be usurped by just startup publications or news sites that do something different. And I mean, we can talk about Mr. Prof's papers, which I'm very familiar with. But the other thing is, like, you just have news sites like CWB Chicago, which, their stuff that they report on, which is all about the crime in Chicago. It frequently gets picked up by national media sources as well, because the regular press does not report, for example, on 40 plus felons that have been released from jail and violate their electronic home monitoring requirements, and then go back and reoffend. And I'm talking serious reoffend, either murder or attempted murder. I mean, you just don't see that level of reporting, I think, in the Daily Herald. It's not splashed across their headlines. It's not splashed as a headline on Chicago Tribune. It's just the problem I see with the press right now is what they report on and the depth that they go on reporting that in terms of fairness.
Yeah, there's virtually no fairness left in much of the main media. It's really disgusting. As someone who practiced this profession for so many years, 4 decades or whatever, I just hate to see what's developed. And wonder what's going on in the journalism colleges. They call them something else now because I guess journalism is not a good thing. But they are teaching that, we have to tell the truth. We're not here to tell the different sides of the story. We can say this side is peddling misinformation, or this side has got it right, all wrong. Well, back when I was a reporter, you didn't make those kinds of judgments. You would report what was being said, what the issues were, and we took pride in that. One of my early projects at the old Daily News, I was a transportation writer and covered the creation of the regional transportation. And that was a huge debate back then. The vote was in 6 counties, and it barely passed. But I was prideful because I took a look at the legislation. I wrote stories that said, here's what the legislation says. Make up your own mind. You don't get that anymore.
Nope.
You got these people making up minds for you.
Or you don't get things put in context. So, for example, this would have been a very simple line to add. The Illinois state legislature passed the largest budget in the history of the state, and it is 50% larger than the budget just 10 years ago. There's no context around the numbers. They just say they passed a $46.5 billion budget. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And what is it funded? And, just add in and over 25% of that budget goes to pensions. I mean, why can't they just say that? Why can't they put that in context? They don't. They just, and then, we're going to fund, domestic abuse shelters and rape kits and we're going to whatever else. So it's like, yeah, but you're also funding a lot of other garbage, or you passed a $46 billion infrastructure bill in 2019 on the back of doubling the gas taxes, which you could have a reasonable argument about the gas tax being increased to provide for some infrastructure support. I think you can have that reasonable argument. You can't have that reasonable argument when that gas tax is going to bail out student loans, which it is. It's going to racialized housing supports. If you're black or brown, you get the $6,000 down payment towards your home. If you're not, you don't. I mean, where's the reporting on this?
It's non-existent. I was thinking along those same lines too about Pritzker saying his budget is balanced.
Yeah, not.
Where's the reporting on the fact that it's balanced because of the huge one-time federal money that's coming in as COVID relief? It's not going to be there the next year. How is he going to balance the budget then?
I don't know. It's just when I sat in Springfield, I was there during the floor debate, and you have reporters sitting there, and then you read the articles. It's like you missed some of the most salient points of the debate. You did not even bring it up. It's very frustrating.
It was. I tell you, one of the big items that got me to change was back in the mid-'80s when the AIDS epidemic broke out. And, I was reporting on what public health steps were. And one of the public health steps that was widely accepted was contact tracing. If you came down with HIV, you would, say who you were in contact with. Well, that was ruled out of bounds. That would never be allowed because it would embarrass people. So, hey, it's a matter of public health. Now we see the opposite, that the argument has been totally flipped. It's in the public interest to have contact tracing. Well, that wasn't the case back in 1986.
Oh, my goodness. That's a great point. I love it. That's great. The other thing that's really important, too, though, with reporters like you is I find two things. One, they don't have a long memory about, this actually the arguments were this last time. this is what the budget was 10 years ago. They don't have a long, some of them actually have been there a long time, but it's like they forgot everything that happened 10, 15 years ago, right? And all the arguments that were made. That's one thing. Number two, they do not take, and I've said this publicly and I will say it again. You know what? Sometimes some of these reporters, you're not qualified to ask me questions. You're not qualified because you didn't do your homework on this subject matter. And if I have to give you a 2-hour tutorial on the pension system, then you know what? I'm wasting all my time. You need to come prepared.
Exactly.
Or the education system, they do not prepare. They don't, and then the editorial boards don't prepare, quite frankly, to ask me questions either. You're not prepared enough to ask me questions. Sorry, it's the truth.
There's a great story about Mike Royko, the old now greatly missed columnist, and he, as a routine, would allow himself to be interviewed by students who were studying journalism, and told the story about how one kid came in. He had no idea what he was asking. He had no idea what the background was. And Royko said to himself, I guess, okay, here's how I'll deal with it. I'll give him one-word answers. Yes, though, I don't know. Eventually, the student figured out, well, I wasn't prepared for this. And he got justly spanked for it by Royko.
Well, there's just not much humility anymore. At least that particular student figured it out. I just don't find that there's the same level of humility with the rest of the media. They actually think that their job is to form public opinion, and rather than just presenting the issues fairly and unbiased. So
that's the heart of the problem. And I think someone ought to take a deep dive into what journalism schools are teaching these days. I mean, here's an example of what I feel. The terrible results of public education.
Yes.
What's going wrong there? Well, if engineers built bridges that kept falling down and failing, people would say, well, what the hell are these people being taught in engineering school? Well, what's being taught in education schools that has produced sometimes no good results, sometimes even bad results? Take a look. Let's hear it. Somebody do some reporting.
Well, you can't see me because we're talking over the phone here, but I am just almost beside myself giggling here because the latest is that the legislature mandated that every high school have a media literacy class available to students. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's remarkable because you're going to have some person who came out of the education training system teaching media bias. Oh, give me a break. I mean, this is just, it's nonsensical. So, yeah.
Well, talking about the coming out of the education schools, I'd say all the people who are coming out of social sciences and humanities have, I hate to use the word brainwashed, but they're committed soldiers to the woke philosophy.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and actually at the high school level as well, I think the best teacher are those who actually have done something and then gone back into teaching. So, my children's best math teachers were people that worked like at Lucent Technologies. And then when Lucent did massive layoffs and got restructured, they said, well, I'm going to go teach high school math. Terrific, right? Because they have real world experience. Those are your best teachers. And we don't really get that. They just move up the rack of teaching and then they become a superintendent and then they're all invested in the system. They're not really adversarial to get the best out of teachers. They're just collaborators with it. And then the school board listens to the teachers unions. I mean, the superintendent, and they also listen to these board associations like the Illinois School Board Association or the Superintendent's Association or the School Administrators Association, you name it, association upon association, and you get nowhere as a parent. So the whole thing needs to be dismantled. So Just, and that's the root of everything. Education is really important to the future of our country, truthfully.
Absolutely.
So what concerns you? You've had a long, you've had a long look at politics. What concerns you when you look at it right now?
Oh man, so much, and I think we have to go all the way down to what voters think and how they think and where they get their information from. And so many voters are voting against their own self-interest.
Yes.
Now, let's take the machine politics in Chicago. They don't call it that anymore. They supposedly had the death of the machine, but I don't think so. There are a lot of people who vote the way they do because it's in their particular interest. They have a job. They're precinct captains. They owe the organization thanks for their job. They come out and do the work. And so you have that one group. You have another group who are ideologues who will, maybe one issue voter like abortion, they will come out and anything that even deviates a little bit from from their platform of abortion anytime for any reason up to the date of birth, they'll vote for the Democrat. Then there are people, I'll give them credit, who actually study the issues and in good faith believe they are voting for the right thing. I'm not going to call every voter stupid or deplorable, or what did Biden call MAGA voters? Good Lord, what are we doing?
Right. I agree. So you touched on a really good subject, because after I lost the 2020 congressional, I just felt like my opponent was not really, he was just interchangeable votes with Nancy Pelosi, which didn't really match our district, nice suburban district. Literally the 6th congressional district in 2020 had a bigger GDP footprint than 3 other states, including Wyoming. Wow. I mean, that's how powerful it was in terms of its wealth formation, its business formation, the people who live there. And you can even, by the way, I know what I know. Why? Because I look at the IRS statistics. It's all there for the taking, right? Yet the misinformation about the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the fact that, it really, was a tax cut for the wealthy. No, it was really a tax cut for the middle class and lower class when you look at all of it. And this whole SALT deduction, nobody wanted to understand the nuances of the legislation. Nobody wants to know the particulars. They all go to a top-line talking point. And I felt like there's the problem here is that voters don't know what they don't know, and there's a lack of information, which is why we started Breakthrough Ideas, was basically to close the information gap where we can pick apart policy. And nobody has been more critical of Republicans in this state than Jeannie Ives, by the way. I took on Browner, the sitting Republican governor with $1 billion checkbook. Nobody does that. And so I come from that position that we have got to get down to what matters to voters. And I could not believe that voters would vote against their own self-interests, whether it's from national security standpoint or taxes or education, you name it. It didn't make sense to me, and I figured out that people just don't know what they don't know. So I don't like to call anybody stupid or MAGA or anything like that. I don't believe in name calling. I really don't. But I do believe that there's a complete lack of information in people, and so that's why we started this entire endeavor, was to bring information to light. And to work locally first. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it's a very busy world out there right now, and people are just extremely inundated with all sorts of stuff, and it's hard to know what's true.
Yeah, but there is some sparks going on, and I think what was happening in the schools, like in Virginia. Mm-hmm. I have some grandchildren there who were kicked out of the classroom, so they had to learn, quotes around that, on remote learning. And the parents there revolted because they now had information about what was going on in their schools like never before, and they rose up. Then they do the same thing. It's very person like you who has studied the issue so often and so deep. It's frustrating to see that people just kind of skim over the substance of what's going on and adapt what amounts to is rhetoric rather than logic or reason or facts.
Yeah, no, it is. So, a couple other things. I wanted to talk to you about Chapter 7 because I think that character counts. And, if you go to even our local park district, they had this whole programming, and it was all about character counts, right? And Chapter 7 in your book about Governor Pritzker is character is supposed to count. And, does it anymore? I mean, the chapter's like this billionaire tries to get a $330,000 property tax cut by taking the toilets out. I mean, who does that?
He doesn't have enough money. We taxpayers have to give him a little more. You look at character throughout the, I say modern history of, say, Chicago, and you got some characters in there who have not much character. People who are openly on the take that's it used to be regarded as somewhat cute. Chicago has this reputation for being corrupt. Ha ha ha. Chicago ain't ready for reform, and all the rest of it. It's here to disgust people, and it doesn't do that.
I agree. It's like it's just that's politics here. Number one, Chicago. This is by the way, a University of Illinois at Chicago ethics report. They do it every year, and they do it on corrupt government bodies. Chicago, since I've been watching it, number one for corrupt practices, and the state of Illinois number 3. And we just accept it. We just accept it.
Yeah. I don't know what.
And this guy, this actually should have tanked his. People should be so appalled at having the second highest property taxes in the nation, over double the national average, inequities out the wazoo. So you've got the poor minority communities in the south suburbs that are paying 6, 7, 8% tax rates on their homes, right? And then you've got the wealthy getting a tax break. The Tribune, back before they became whatever they are now, did a seminal study on this as well, saying that the wealthy people were getting undertaxed by 10%, and the minority communities and the lower income areas were getting overtaxed by 10%. They did this whole study, and nothing, and that should have been the issue in 2018, and with Pritzker taking a $330,000 tax break that he paid back and then shamefully tried to blame on his wife. I mean, come on, people. And you elected him. You cry about your property taxes, and you elect this guy who scammed on his. I don't get it. That alone should have been warning signals.
Well, you mentioned the south suburbs. Let me digress just a little bit.
Sure.
How the south suburbs are treated, where, minorities have fled from the city because of the crime that's allowed to happen there. There was a long time discussion about building a third regional airport down in the south suburbs. It would have brought jobs to those places. It would have improved the economic development. But guess who opposed it? The power structure in Chicago, the politicians, the unions, everyone else who had some their oar in up at O'Hare, and they wouldn't allow the expansion. I mean, what major city says we don't want any development? God, Lord, where are we?
Well, you can't. I mean, Mike Madigan represented at that time the entire Midway area, so the competition got shut down. That's essentially what happened. And yeah. Well, okay, so you let's just turn to something a little bit more personal. You, as we record this, are in Florida, just 2 days after the hurricane hit. How's it going down there? We've got a clear signal here. I don't know where you're located, but what's happening down there?
We're in Jacksonville, up at the northeastern part of the state. We're lucky. The hurricane screwed us. It went back out into the ocean, and we got a lot of rain and a lot of wind, and but nothing so fierce as. And I want to put in a plug for what happened in southern Florida. It is horrendous. People out of their jobs, out of their homes, no place to go. There are, just go online. I did a little while ago. See where you can donate some money to rescue efforts, to the rebuilding efforts. There's a whole bunch of them, and I won't plug any particular one. But God, open your hearts to the people who are really devastated. It's so sad.
Oh yeah, I know. It's how's the response been? Because we're sitting up here, we only see what we maybe hear from the national. How's the response in Florida? Do you feel like they're doing as good a job as they possibly can?
Oh, definitely. And not to insert politics here, but Governor DeSantis, from the very start, before the hurricane hit, was mapping out plans, organizing everything. Maybe problems will appear later on as they get into more of the rescue and the rebuilding, but it's been terrific. Here I would say government is here to help you, and they're doing it.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you so much for your time this morning. You've been just a terrific guest. I've just, again, it's intimidating to actually interview somebody of your stature. So I appreciate you coming on to our podcast, The Real Story with Jeannie Ives, and thank you for all that you do, Dennis.
Let me put in a plug, though.
Okay.
The book is available on the internet. Some people won't get it in the mail. But to go to pritzkerbook.com, you can download a PDF, or there's an audio version there. So I do my publisher a favor for that.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yes, I forgot to do that. I wanted to plug it, and I actually didn't know the website to find it. So pritzkerbook.com for The Governor You Do Not Know, What Every Illinoisan Should Know. Dennis Byrne, have a great day, and thank you for the interview.